thank you, those that read one of the readings. Now is the time that anyone is welcome to say a prayer. Just remember that you should unmute yourself if you are muted.
Anyone is welcome. No.
Amelia, would you like to say a prayer, sweetheart? Go ahead.
What? What did you say?
Anyone who would like to say a prayer right now is welcome to. So please go ahead and unmute yourself and say a prayer. You're welcome to, Amelia. Would you like to say a prayer?
You say a prayer just now. Amelia, go ahead.
Thy name is my healing, O my God, and remembrance of thee is my remedy. Nearness to thee is my hope, and love thee is my companion. That mercy to me is my healing, my succor, in both this world and world to come. The really are the powerful, the honor, they are wise.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Laura. That was so beautiful. Wonderful. Thank you, friends, for being here today. It is, how's it out there for you all? Is it raining? It's still raining over here. Oh, my goodness. So this is exciting that we're all here together. We're going to have a discussion this morning on prosperity for humankind. I am going to put the link in the chat for us all so that we can keep it in this format so that we can see each other as we consult. I also want to let you know that we are live streaming on our YouTube channel. So just please know that if you like to leave your cameras on, cameras off, however you are more comfortable, and that we'll start our discussion. So can everyone access the document? It is called The Prosperity of Humankind. It is a statement prepared by the Baha'i International Community Office of Public Information for the Baha'i world. And I can start with the first couple of paragraphs, and we can read. There are sections to this. If we could maybe get through the preamble, and we'll stop at the top of section 1 and discuss. How does that sound? Okay, very good. So why don't I start, and then we can just take turns. To an extent unimaginable a decade ago, the ideal of world peace is taking on a form and substance. Obstacles that long seemed immovable have collapsed in humanity's path. Apparently irreconcilable conflicts have begun to surrender to the process of consultation and resolution. A willingness to counter military aggression through unified international action is emerging. The effect has been to awaken in both the masses of humanity and many world leaders a degree of hopefulness about the future of our planet that had been nearly extinguished. Throughout the world, immense intellectual and spiritual energies are seeking expression, energies whose gathering pressure is in direct proportion to the frustrations of recent decades. Everywhere the signs multiply that the earth's peoples yearn for an end to conflict and to suffering and ruin from which no land is any longer immune. These rising impulses for change must be seized upon and channeled into overcoming the remaining barriers that block realization of the age-old dream of global peace. The effort of will required for such a task cannot be summoned up merely by appeals for action against the countless ills afflicting society. It must be galvanized by a vision of human prosperity in the fullest sense of the term, an awakening to the possibilities of the spiritual and material well-being now brought within grasp. Its beneficiaries must be all of the planet's inhabitants without distinction, without the imposition of conditions unrelated to the fundamental goals of such a reorganization of human affairs. You know, friends, I just realized we're live streaming and folks don't know what document we're at. So I apologize. I will have to share screen so that everyone can see. We do have some folks that are watching so they can watch with us. So here is where we're at. Okay, so who would like to read next? We are right here. Please unmute and read.
I'll go ahead and read.
Thank you.
History has thus far recorded principally the experience of tribes, cultures, classes, and nations. With the physical unification of the planet in this century, an acknowledgement of the interdependence of all who live on it, the history of humanity as one people is now beginning. The long, slow civilizing of human character has been a sporadic development, uneven, and admittedly inequitable in the material advantages it has conferred. Nevertheless, endowed with the wealth of all the genetic and cultural diversity that has evolved through past ages, the Earth's inhabitants are now challenged to draw on their collective inheritance to take up consciously and systematically the responsibility for the design of their future. It is unrealistic to imagine that the vision of the next stage in the advancement of civilization can be formulated without a searching re-examination of the attitudes and assumptions that currently underlie approaches to social and economic development. At the most obvious level, such rethinking will have to address practical matters of policy, resource utilization, planning procedures, implementation methodologies, and organization. As it proceeds, however, fundamental issues will quickly emerge related to the long-term goals to be pursued, the social structures required, the implications for development of principles of social justice, and the nature and role of knowledge in effecting enduring change. Indeed, such a re-examination will be driven to seek a broad consensus of understanding about human nature itself.
I can read. Two avenues of discussion open directly onto all of these issues, whether conceptual or practical. And it is along these two avenues that we wish to explore in the pages that follow the subject of a strategy of global development. The first is prevailing beliefs about the nature and purpose of the development process. The second is the roles assigned in it to the various protagonists. The assumptions directing most of current development planning are essentially materialistic. That is to say, the purpose of development is defined in terms of the successful cultivation in all societies of those means for the achievement of material prosperity that have, through trial and error, already come to characterize certain regions of the world. Modifications in development discourse do indeed occur, accommodating differences of culture and political system, and responding to the alarming dangers posed by environmental degradation. Yet the underlying materialistic assumptions remain essentially unchallenged. As the 20th century draws to a close, it is no longer possible to maintain the belief that the approach to social and economic development to which the materialistic conception of life has given rise is capable of meeting humanity's needs. Optimistic forecasts about the changes it would generate have vanished into the ever-widening abyss that separates the living standards of a small and relatively diminishing minority of the world's inhabitants from the poverty experienced by the vast majority of the globe's population.
Who would like to read next? Let's see. Chris, are you on? Would you like to read the next two paragraphs?
Sure. This unprecedented economic crisis, together with the social breakdown it has helped to engender, reflects a profound error of conception about human nature itself. For the levels of response elicited from human beings by the incentives of the prevailing order are not only inadequate, but seem almost irrelevant in the face of world events. We are being shown that unless the development of society finds a purpose beyond the mere amelioration of material conditions, it will fail of attaining even these goals. That purpose must be sought in spiritual dimensions of life and motivation that transcend a constantly changing economic landscape and an artificially imposed division of human societies into developed and developing. As the purpose of development is being redefined, it'll become necessary also to look again at assumptions about the appropriate roles to be played by the protagonists in the process. The crucial role of government at whatever level requires no elaboration. Future generations, however, will find almost incomprehensible the circumstances that, in an age paying tribute to an egalitarian philosophy and related democratic principles, development planning should view the masses of humanity as essentially recipients of benefits from aid and training. Despite acknowledgement of participation as a principle, the scope of decision-making left to most of the world's population is at best secondary, limited to a range of choices formulated by agencies inaccessible to them and determined by goals that are often irreconcilable with their perceptions of reality. This approach is even endorsed implicitly, if not explicitly, by established religion. Burdened by traditions of paternalism, prevailing religious thought seems incapable of translating an expressed faith in the spiritual dimensions of human nature into confidence in humanity's collective capacity to transcend material conditions.
Thank you. Wonderful. Okay, and then can someone please finish these two paragraphs, and we'll stop before section 1. Lisa, would you like to read this?
Okay. Such an attitude misses the significance of what is likely the most important social phenomenon of our time. If it is true that the governments of the world are striving through the medium of the United Nations system to construct a new global order, it is equally true that the peoples of the world are galvanized by this same vision. Their response has taken the form of a sudden efflorescence of countless movements and organizations of social change at local, regional, and international levels. Human rights, the advance of women, the social requirements of sustainable economic development, the overcoming of prejudices, the moral education of children, literacy, primary health care, and a host of other vital concerns each commands the urgent advocacy of organizations supported by growing numbers in the globe. This response of the world's people themselves to the crying needs of the age echoes the call that Baha'u'llah raised over 100 years ago. Be anxiously concerned with the needs of the age you live in, and consider and center your deliberations on its exigencies and requirements. The transformation in the way that great numbers of ordinary people are coming to see themselves, a change that is dramatically abrupt in the perspective of the history of civilization, raises fundamental questions about the role assigned to the general body of humanity in the planning of our planet's future.
Thank you so much. Wow. Whew, amazing for our discussion this morning. So friends, what are some of the themes that stand out here about our understanding, our current understanding about human nature? What conceptions do we have? What is the Baha'i perspective and what is the prevailing perspective? As well as what are the divisions that are artificially imposed on our societies based on those understandings? Go ahead, please. Who has some thoughts about that? I will call on you. So, Laura, did you unmute? Do you have something to say? Go ahead, please.
Well, I had some thoughts, but they weren't addressing the question that you asked.
Go ahead, share your thoughts, and then we'll get to the question.
Okay, I have random thoughts. So, I think this letter is, or document is trying to emphasize that there's this balance between the material and the spiritual, and now there's an imbalance between the two, because there are nations that have all the wealth. At this point in time, it's almost individuals that have all the wealth, and that most of the world is in poverty. So that, to get that balance shifted, we have to sort of look at the spiritual side of our nature and create a path to make those two things balance out. And I know there's been lots of articles on development projects over the past 20 years that seem to point out that, and I think this, what they were talking about here, that not using, by imposing a particular way or standard on these developing nations when they receive money, it is not working out as well as they had thought it would. And I think, they've discovered that that's because they're not consulting with the people that it affects. So those were my thoughts.
Thank you.
That, not addressing your question.
Well, I think addressing it, but yeah, this is great. So again, let me pose the question again, because everything it sounds like this section's talking about is about how we view things and our intentions, because everything in the physical world has been created either by design or is growing by design and neglect. It didn't just appear out of nowhere. It was designed to function in a certain way. And we design things based on our best current understanding and our attitudes, values, and beliefs, and the resources available. So whatever we have created, whether it's working or not working, is by design. And now there is a new way of thinking, a new mind, a new spirit, a new heart that has been infused into the world that is about oneness from the many one, harmonizing everything into one. How do we go from this long, slow civilizing of human character that they talk about, the individual character that then designs the systems, that then operates in the world, and then we look at the systems and say, well, that's the truth, because look, it's operating that way. Where we, in fact, they're asking us to go very far underneath and say, wait, what exactly is our view? Well, how do we view everyone? Now, this is not just for developing, undeveloped, quote unquote, world. This is for everyone in the world. Look at all of the challenges that we're having in our society as we're trying to come up with a new way for America to move forward. Now, I'm not saying we're changing the system. I'm saying we're changing the way we view who we are, what we learn, how we serve, what we create. And so how does this apply for you all? What are you thinking about artificially imposed divisions, material prosperity versus spiritual prosperity? What are some thoughts about that?
Could I speak a second?
Oh, of course. Go ahead, Jane.
One of the things I'm noticing in the beginning, it does say to an extent unimaginable a decade ago. So they're saying that we have they're seeing this great hope in 1995 that they didn't see in 1985. So here we are decades away from that. And so I'm kind of looking at it through those eyes, through the time period of the document and where we are today. And it does seem to me that the intellectual and spiritual energies are seeking expression. I think that has grown and grown and grown. But I also think that the opposing, the more materialistic side has become empowered and they're kicking and screaming and holding on. So I guess I'm seeing more conflict.
Mm-hmm. Interesting
That's how
point.
I'm kind of looking at it. The time frame that we're in now, how do you feel about that?
Very good point. So which is it? Is it falling apart, or is it like an illness that gets better before it gets better? It gets worse before it gets better. What do you all think?
I
Well,
was just oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead, Lise.
Oh, well, I was just thinking about the trends in society in the 90s. Remember, there was that shop till you drop attitude, and now minimalism is so popular.
That's right, a big change. That's true. Aaron, what are your thoughts?
I think it's very confusing is not the right word, but we have the energies that are released with the manifestation into the world, and depending on our receptivity to those energies, they either get expressed positively or negatively. The energies themselves are neutral. So the world is going through a disintegration, even as it's being upbuilt. And so we can look at places like science and other institutions or other things that are going on where the world keeps advancing. But unfortunately, too, and I listened to a couple of talks by former members of the House of Justice over the past few days, and Baha'u'llah talked about about how religion was going away once the or what was this? This was a document. Maybe it was in the advent of divine justice, but as the world becomes increasingly irreligious, and as the problems of religion multiply, as far as the religion being used as a kind of a belief system that further divides the world is going to disintegrate into a more and more base moral state. And I think we're really seeing that amp up, recently.
Yeah, very interesting. Thank you, Aaron. Any other thoughts about this section before we move on? Go ahead, please. Any thoughts? Okay. Wow, a lot to think about as we move forward. All right, let's see. We are here, the bedrock of strategy. So if we could keep this in mind in terms of the whole world, not just development as in there's a group of nations or people that need to be developed like everyone else. How do we keep everything in balance now, 15, 20 years later, in terms of understanding material prosperity and spiritual prosperity as working hand in hand? What does that mean? What can we glean from this? So let's see, Sergey, would you like to read the next two paragraphs for us?
It's where it starts, the bedrock.
Yes, please.
The bedrock of a strategy that can engage the world's population is assuming responsibility for its collective destiny must be the consciousness of the oneness of humanity. Deceptively simple in popular discourse, the concept of the humanity continues a single, the concept that humanity continues a single people presents fundamental challenges to the way that most of the institutions of contemporary society carry out their functions. Whether in the form of the adversarial structure of civil government, the advocacy principle informing most of civil law, a glorification of the struggle between classes and other social groups, or the competitive spirit dominating so much of modern life, conflict is accepted as the mainspring of human interaction. It represents yet another expression of social organization, of the materialistic interpretation of life that has progressively consolidated itself over the past 2 centuries. In the letter addressed to the Queen Victoria over a century ago, and employing an analogy that points to the one model holding convincing promise for the organization of a planetary society, Baha'u'llah compared the world to the human body. There is indeed no other model in phenomenal existence to which we can reasonably look. Human society is composed not of a mass of merely differentiated cells, but of associations of individuals, each one of whom is endowed with intelligence and will. Nevertheless, the modes of operation that characterize man's biological nature illustrate fundamental principles of existence. Chief among these is that of unity in diversity. Paradoxically, it is precisely the wholeness and complexity of the order constituting the human body and the perfect integration into it of the body's cells that permit the full realization of the distinctive capacities inherent in each of these component elements. No cells live apart from the body, whether in contributing to its functioning or in deriving its share from the well-being of the whole. The physical well-being thus achieved finds its purpose in making possible the expression of human consciousness. That is to say, the purpose of biological development transcends the mere existence of the body and its parts.
Wow, this is getting very deep now. Maybe we can stop every couple of paragraphs and have a conversation around what it is that we're actually reading. So, what do you think about the role of conflict as it was explained, how we accept conflict and struggle as a mainspring of human interaction? That's so fascinating, especially about everything that's going on right now. Chris, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I think the writings clearly tell us that conflict is not a bad thing. Conflict is actually a good thing, and how we deal with it is the critical thing. What I see happening now is in America, we see radical individualism, is what we sociologists call it. That the individual's needs transcend the group, the collectivity, and that is contrary to the Baha'i belief. Although we do believe the individuals is important, but the group is important as well. So, I think there's a struggle worldwide with trying to recognize the needs of others. And we're transitioning now. You have the essential theme given to the world by Baha'u'llah in the 1800s of unity. And at that point, unity was attempted to be on a national level. Now we're talking about globalism. So the struggle today is between nationalism and globalism. We make efforts toward globalism with the trade and everything else, but then we're now reverting back to nationalism. So you have the themes given to us, that I think this example was given by Hegel. He talked about you have a theme, and then you have a counter to that theme, and then you have unity after that. You have conflict is what happens after the theme.
Mm-hmm.
And the theme is unity. We're having conflict now, but there'll be a synthesis down the road. We're promised that.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. That's so interesting, Chris. There is a book. It's a New York Times best-selling author, Amanda Ripley, wrote a book called High Conflict. I'll put it in chat. And in it, she actually, it's called High Conflict, Why We Get Trapped and How to Get Out. It's all about where we are right now in the binary political high conflict environment. And she says the Baha'is are really the only group that knows how to work with conflict and how to avoid conflict in their process in a healthy way. Because she says once conflict starts, it is very difficult to come out of conflict. So she's saying, look at the process of consultation and elections that the Baha'is have to see as a new way to do politics, in her words. So it's really interesting. I'll put that in chat, and let me quickly do a search here while we can see it. It's called High Conflict. Why? Here it is, by Amanda. So we can see, this is the book, and there is an interview that she did. And in it, she actually talks about the Baha'is as an example. And she had never heard of the Baha'i faith. She never knew what it was. And she did her research on conflict and said that that actually helped her. So there are, but we know in the Baha'i process of consultation, we're told not to be afraid of the clash of opinions, because from that, the spark of truth comes, but that we are not to offend and not to take offense. And as soon as we start to consult, our ideas no longer belong to us, it belongs to the group. So there is a relationship between the individual and the community in consultation even. So it's an interesting thing. And so that one is just out. What about, friends, what is this whole concept of the complexity of the human body as a model for diversity of the human world? What do you all think about that? Curtis, what are your thoughts about that? Putting Curtis on the spot. Are you there, Curtis? Hello.
Hi. Why would you do that?
Because I love you, and
why would you put me on the spot?
Because I know you have wisdom to share. Go. No.
Yeah, it's a pretty obvious, a wonderful example, and so it kind of makes you wonder why it's not realized or understood even today here, more than 100 years after Baha'u'llah wrote to Queen Victoria, that any one of us, if we have the slightest little ailment on the most insignificant piece of our body, for myself, I'm in such pain and agony, I can't do anything because my toenail hurts or something. So the slightest little thing cripples us almost. And to not see that we are connected, and so whatever the injustice that's happening in some island that we've never heard of or some country that we don't know anything about, and to just blow it off, say, well, that's those people over there. To me, it's such an obvious, but I've been a Baha'i too long, I guess. So it's.
So there are things that we take for granted, right? So
yes,
if
and
it's
good to rethink them.
It's good to rethink them. So if we're one, what a strange concept that we're all one. That is such an interesting and strange concept. We can't accept that because we live in a world of duality where there has to be good, there has to be bad, there has to be up, there has to be down, there has to be male, there has to be female, night, day, everything's in duality. And we learn somewhere that everything is one. What does that mean? Aaron, go ahead, please.
I love this, how they say deceptively simple, this concept of the oneness of humanity. It just rolls off people. It's, it's almost like a commercial or, a soundbite or something that, it's just so, people just say it. And it's, when Baha'u'llah tells us what it is, it's way more than a McDonald's commercial or something like that.
That's a T-shirt right there. It's more than a McDonald's commercial. I love it. Thank you. No, that's good. Excellent. Okay, Aaron, go ahead, please.
I think it comes back to a little bit of what Chris was saying and what you just said about duality, is that we do have a principle of competition in nature, but we also have, and maybe arguably even a greater principle of cooperation, that both of them have to be present in the natural world. And so, we understand God, we understand the material world as being an emanation of the attributes of God. And God, of course, contains all those dualities, right? So they become dualities for us, but they're really interacting principles. I mean, the incomprehensibility of God is that he's both competition, or it is an attribute of competition, attribute of conflict. So one aspect in relating to what Chris said, relating to the former paragraph, or the earlier, what we talked about, is to focus on materialism, which goes back to my earlier comment about irreligion in the world, about the people turning away from religion. That naturally seems, I think who wrote the letter? Is it from the Universal House of Justice, or is it from?
It is the international Baha'i community that serves the Universal House of Justice.
I think that what they're speaking to is the fact that, part of the imbalance of a materialistic framework is that the idea of competition starts to trump, or the idea of conflict starts to trump the idea of cooperation.
Oh.
And I forgot my original point going in, but it was just something to the effect that, that if we look at nature as a model, there's a balance, and we're profoundly integrated, which is to your question, that you asked us to, the metaphor of the body. And to Curtis's point that that even the most seemingly insignificant, like we don't, when we think of politics today, in terms of the increasing nationalism, or just in terms of, our own country, we don't realize that, or that the inequalities in the world and the lack of development in some place that we may consider very insignificant may have a very, very consequential, if confusingly indirect, connection to our own prosperity. I mean, we're all basically in this together on a small life raft in the middle of space. And that's part of what, the world is recognizing. I mean, you can't avoid it. I mean, globalization is shrinking the world, new technologies, but the old religious ideas of thinking, the old political ideas of thinking are inadequate to address this new reality.
Okay.
Which is, the staple of the Baha'i, of Baha'u'llah's revelation.
Yes, that's wonderful. Thank you, Aaron. So a couple of things that, as we're all speaking, sort of is coming to mind. One is, if we are accustomed to privilege, equality may feel like oppression. Let me say that again. If we are accustomed to privilege, equality may feel like oppression, because there is a reason that I have my privilege, and my privilege is based on, and then we fill in the blanks, friends, as we're told in the letter, to justify our position, to justify what we have anywhere, in our families, at work, in our communities, in our country, in the world. So they are asking us to do the hard work of examining the underlying, the root cause thinking of where the problems of the world are, and to look at the three protagonists: the individual, me, myself, and I; the community, what I'm part of and what I'm creating; and the institutions that maintain the belief systems of the community and the individual. So it's a very systems thinking. It's a very sophisticated way that they're asking us, as religion adherents of Baha'u'llah, adherents of God, to be able to think about it from a position of justice and fairness. So that's one thing. Everything's in the balance of justice. And Baha'u'llah says the appearance of justice is so that it can lead us to unity. It's not an end to itself. Justice is the pathway to unity. It is to help create unity. Without justice, right? Baha'u'llah says the well-being of mankind, its peace and security are unattainable unless and until its unity is firmly established. We can't establish unity until we think, act, do, believe, create injustice, not injustice, through justice, by the aid of justice, by the light and path of justice, to get to unity. So that's one thing. Second is, it seems like all religious teaching is the pathway from self to selflessness, that continuum. So if we think of it as going up, the lowest level, first level, where everything is the densest in terms of material world. So if the material world, the world of creation, we're told, and the world of revelation are mirror of each other. If you want to learn about the world of creation, look to the world of revelation. If you want to understand the world of revelation, there are all kinds of beautiful clues, examples, teachings available in the world of creation. Again, this concept of unity that create the whole. So if that is true, then we are moving from our understanding of the densest materials in the world are the ones that move the less in terms of energy. On the quantum physics level, they're not moving very much, right? But as we rise up, there's more movement, there's more action, and our understanding also expands. So I would love to hear any thoughts you all have about what's coming up for you all. So how do we move from self to selflessness as individuals, as communities, as societies, as organizations, structures, because again, everything is by design, ensuring that as we are allowing more light to come in, allowing more energy to flow in, things are going to become unstable for us. Things are going to start shifting and it's going to feel very uncomfortable because we're so accustomed to one way of being, and trying to go to the next level feels like things are falling apart. This is not good. Just some thoughts. What are you all thinking? Nabil Jun, what are your thoughts? Put Nabil on the spot. Put down the taco, breakfast taco, and let's talk. I love him. He's my brother. Nabil, are you there? I don't know.
I
Hi,
am.
Nabil Jun. Go ahead.
So we were traveling. We were camping, and we broke camp earlier than normal. And when I realized, hey, it's 10:30, so that's why we're joining in from the car. But I am in my garage now. I'm about to head out again. But no, it was we have. There are a lot of things, a lot of the point you made about privilege, you're not aware of a privilege that you have. It's the person or the group that is denied the privilege that realizes that they're denied something. Usually when something is just a matter of course, it's a matter of course. That's what life is like. And you don't realize that others don't have the same access sometimes. And so it's almost it needs to be as individuals, for us as individuals, it's going to be a continuous discovery or exploration of things that we don't realize, because we don't know what other people's lives are like, and that's true for everybody. People who may not have the same material things that we do may still have privileges that we are not aware of, and that we don't really that we might yearn for as well. So yeah, I think it's something that we should often think about often, and not be surprised by the fact that others have a different experience than we do.
Thank you, Nabil Jun. Thank you for that. Wonderful. Any other thoughts? Erin, you had something else you want to share? You look like you're thinking very deeply. Go ahead.
No, but it's only to your point that as we move from selflessness, or from selfishness to selflessness, the other way of kind of conceiving this is that we're moving to an interdependency, which of course you have to become independent before you can become interdependent, right?
Ooh,
Otherwise it's otherwise it's like a codependence.
That's
right? It's an unhealthy integration. But to Chris Johnson's kind of point about the positive aspects of competition, because we usually think of competition in terms of self-interest. And to my point about the fact that we're actually in a very kind of small life raft on this planet, right? Our global civilization, that's really in our self-interest. That's the paradox of it. That to move from selfishness to selflessness, you're motivated by self-interest, right? So it's like you can be selfish, but in a positive way, right? So even that has a kind of duality, because even though, even something that we think of as a negative, to your point, even something that we think of as a negative quality like selfishness has still itself has a duality. There's maybe a positive kind of selfishness and a negative destructive kind of selfishness.
Thank you. Chris, you had some thoughts? Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I think what's beautiful, Aaron made a great point there about that, is that is part of self-love is taking care of yourself, and not being codependent, but also realizing that once you love yourself and you take care of your needs, your ability to love others is going to increase. What's beautiful to me about the Baha'i writings from a sociologist standpoint is at Baha'u'llah moves from micro level to macro level in his writings. He points out how important the micro level is, using the human body as an example. And the human body, if you don't handle conflict well, research has shown that you actually are going to get sick. You bottle up your emotions, or you don't know how to handle conflict in a constructive way, it's going to have very negative effects. Communication at the micro level, starting with couples, the smallest microcosm is the couple. And so when couples and families are in unity, then that's has a broader effect. So he'll move from that level of the body, how it gets sick if you don't handle conflict well, to larger levels of sociological analysis. He's a master at sociology and economics. There's a reason why the Guardian said go into sociology or economics, because the writings actually support it.
Interesting.
And the macro level is that we're swinging from the thesis that the Baha'i faith gave to the antithesis, which is the conflict now between nationalism and globalism, and then the broader synthesis that we know is going to happen, not in my lifetime or your lifetime, but down the road, the unity of humankind. And so what we're trying to do is we're swinging from, the couple, the neighborhood, working in our neighborhoods, to broader, to our society, and then to the nation. That's what's so much fun for us as Baha'is is we have this, great task that lies ahead each and every day to kind of move from micro to macro levels, all along a continuum of the people that are brought into our lives and the things that we're doing in our projects and daily work and labor.
Yes, thank you. That's awesome. So to think through that, so there is this thinking process that's expanding constantly in terms of our understanding of what reality is, and then we have to put it into action. So there is also the practice part of it. Karen, I wonder if you could speak to that in terms of the work that you do in healthcare, and how do you see what we're talking about in terms of prosperity of mankind and this balance of the spiritual and material prosperity?
Thanks for calling on me. I just actually was going to raise my hand to speak, so you read my mind. What I was thinking is, I'm not sure if I would answer your question exactly, but the conversation led me to think about is our expectations and vision, and how very important having expectations and visions are, those in the business world. And, actually my agency that I work for, Department of State Services, we have a vision of a healthier Texas. And, with the Baha'i faith, we have a vision of a world peace. And that's so important, because if your actions every day are guided by a vision of world peace, as opposed to a vision of a lot of darkness. People have some very dark visions right now. There's all this conspiracy theory stuff, and it's kind of like, I've been really struggled with this lately. How can you, now what I realize is people have very dark visions of our world. And I think the conspiracy theorist just kind of is like proof of that, or like a symptom of this greater illness of a lack of a positive vision of what if you have an idea that humanity is only capable of dark and horrible things, that the world is moving towards chaos and is going to be taken over by black helicopters, or something, that so many people are living with these very dark visions of the world, or that we're on the brink of chaos and disaster, and people are going to be assaulted in their homes, and you have to defend yourself because darkness is coming. Then you're going to live and act in a different way than if your vision is of a greater world peace coming. So I think that kind of explains a lot of things that are happening right now. If you have a dark apocalyptic vision of the future versus a future where we're using technology and science and moving towards a better world, and that's why the message of the Baha'i faith is so important, because people need a vision of light. Mm-hmm. We don't need more visions of darkness and chaos and horrible things.
How would you then, Karen, speak to the fact, are Baha'is then utopian, sort of well-meaning, well-intentioned, but not grounded in reality? I mean, I'm just trying to figure out what people would say about us. How would you talk about this vision in terms of the reality of what it is? That is light and possibilities.
Well, I mean that, you have a choice of a future, and which future do you choose? What is your choice of a future? What future do you want? Who wants the darkness and the disaster? We Baha'is, choose light and choose positivity and health and a healthier planet and a peacefuler place, a more peaceful place. And so it comes down to, are you going to work toward, which vision are you going to work towards? So, and at an individual level, which vision are you going to work for each day in your life? And you can say we're optimists, but the alternative is what? Working towards a negative vision? I mean, how are you going to operate in your life? Even if we're wrong and the world falls into chaos and darkness, at least and you can just see the incredible toll that takes. I think it's kind of self-evident in our society that a vision of darkness, where that leads us, it does lead to chaos. So it's, it's self-fulfilling. If you act every day with paranoia, with the idea that of a dark future. So I think as Baha'is, we can say, well, it may sound innocent, but what's the alternative? How are you going to live your life?
How will you live? And wherever our attention goes, that's where our energies flow. Okay, Aaron, go ahead, please.
I just wanted to say something challenging, actually, and that is that I think a lot of times when we present the faith, it's true that the world may go badly, but I think that we have to recognize that from the Baha'i perspective, this is based on the reality of a spiritual world, of a greater spiritual world, and a greater a greater vision of reality than just the material world. Because when the manifestation comes, he releases energies. And when you let me think of the best way to say it, because I don't think people necessarily consciously rebel against the authority, because in all fairness, people have to investigate it, and then they're left up to men of good, or persons of goodwill can have a lot of, we all have our misbeliefs. But I think that the consequence here is that we as Baha'is especially, and I think that, Shoghi Effendi talks about this in the Advent of Divine Justice, we have to channel these energies to create the positive world, right? So it's not utopian in the sense that we think that we're going to create a world out of our human nature, or out of our base human nature. We're creating a world through the grace of God, and only by the surrender to that grace will it come about, right? So at least for religious people, that's what separates the idea of a utopian society where, we're doing it through our own ideology, through our own nature, as opposed to the realization or the recognition of Baha'is that God is actually bringing this about. But we do have to be aware that the world just isn't, the way it is. And then Baha'u'llah very intentionally, by manifesting, released energies, which are now bringing the world into a greater threat of destruction than ever existed in the past. And so it's really for us to go out and teach the faith and to live the faith as a model of how to harness these energies in a positive way that then brings about the course that the world is on inevitably anyway, which is that we are recognizing that we're one human family, that we live in a very interconnected social system. And it can't be denied now that what happens in, a small African nation can be as pivotal as what happened to the two superpowers. I'm bad at coming up with analogies on the spot. The point is, we're in this together. So I go back to my raft analogy, right? Because that's more apt than ever. But I just wanted to point that out, that it's not just like the world is the way that the world is. We definitely have this thought, this understanding that civilization is built through religion, and is built through the interaction of the manifestation and then the human response to that manifestation as it evolves on an ever-changing world. And to Karen's point, is that then it's all based on a choice. And then untranslated writings of the Bab, the Bab did mention that the reason that we have free will is so that we can choose or reject to accept the will of God. So the illicit use of free will is to voluntarily submit to the will of God, right? So that might be, I don't know, I'll let somebody pick up on that if they want to, maybe not say it so much dogmatic terms, but we do have a choice, but this is choices based on an actual reality, that energies are now in the world that we have to learn to deal with them.
Yeah, and then they have consequences, is what you're saying. Very interesting. Anyone wants to address that? Go ahead, please.
Yeah, and back to your question to me earlier about health. For me, working in the public health field, this is the most exciting time I've ever had in my life of public health. And it's also a time when the world has come together. And I think people are kind of missing the miracle in front of their faces, that it's like, oh, how can the world ever come together? Well, God just gave us the world coming together in the last year, and we're living in an incredible, unprecedented time. From a Baha'i viewpoint, I've just been blown away by it. I mean, for once, it's like the entire world is under the exact same experience. For the first time in possibly history, that we all are dealing with the exact same problem and the exact same solutions to that problem. And we're at another crucial juncture, because we have a chance for the entire world to beat the pandemic, and it relies on the redistribution of wealth. Basically, the wealthier countries can stop the death and the sickness in poorer countries by rising to the occasion and distributing vaccine to bring about the end of the pandemic. And so it is incredible unifying opportunity in the history of the world like we've never seen before. And so my point of view of the pandemic is, it's been both a global disaster, but it's been an incredible unifying experience that I just can't see, as a Baha'i, can't but see the hand of divine intervention in it.
And what you're saying, implicit in everything that you're saying, Karen, is that it's not a technology solution. It is a will solution. It's an understanding of, actually, in a way, but not also. I mean, I, of course, as a public health person, have been struggling a lot with the goodness of people and the point of views of people. It's been really hard for me, because growing up, I grew up a Baha'i. My parents became Baha'is when I was 8, and
The Baha'i adults in my life are some of the most basically amazing, knowledgeable, advanced people, human beings that I knew growing up. It has always really impressed me about the faith. And it's been really hard for me seeing people reject the technology or be afraid of the changes that have happened. And I was just talking to my husband last night, like us coming up with this vaccine in record time is an example of what can happen if the entire world, all the best scientists and tons of money are focused on solving one simple problem. What if the world could continuously do that? Like, let's focus on this. Let's put all the governments of the world, let's put all the money we have and our best scientists working. And it's a perfect example of we did it. We created a vaccine in record time. And it's because we had a focus, a world focus on this resolving the same issue. And that's why we did it.
Yeah, beautifully said. Wonderful. What other thoughts? We have about 5 minutes. There's some folks who haven't shared yet. You're welcome to jump in. I promise not to call on you. But if there's anything else you'd like to share in the 5 minutes that we have for the program, how wonderful. What a great discussion. This has been so thoughtful, and it's made me think deeply about some of my own assumptions. It's so great when our assumptions are tested and then we have to evaluate them and then expand them. And what an amazing thing it is to be able to truly consult in a free way and everyone share their thoughts in such thoughtful and insightful ways so that we can all learn together and learn from each other. Any last thoughts? Curtis, go ahead, please.
I would really like to see a discussion like this on some of the pages that follow ones that we read, because the whole document is pretty amazing. And considering also someone mentioned about how it's a 25-year-old document that we're just now starting to understand.
Yeah.
I feel like the House of Justice knew the question before and had the answer before we even knew the question.
Yes.
And the whole there's a large concept about the process of consultation being a key gift from Baha'u'llah to humankind to resolve the problems. And like Karen was saying, the way to get together and resolve these problems, if it weren't through having the ability to consult and to communicate and the willingness, you can't, that's showing it's not just the money, it's the realization that we are one human body, one human family, and understanding the oneness of mankind. So anyway,
yeah,
well, I wouldn't mind seeing some more of a follow-up one.
There you go. You're going to get it, Curtis. You will get it. Next week, we're going to continue this discussion. And we're going to use the same document. We're going to pick up where we left off.
Okay,
so,
you can send me the check in the mail.
Yeah, I know. This is so great. Well, thank you, everyone, for being here. I'm going to play a song of Hidden Words, which is a prayer, as a way for us to end this section. And then we're going to stop the live stream, and then we can have the after party, as so we call it, where we're off the live stream, and then you're welcome to continue chatting. So I'm going to share my screen for that prayer, and then we will stop the live stream, and then we'll see where we're at. Thank you. Have a great week. And I hope all of these ideas that we were exploring today will help inform our thinking and decision-making this week to come.
Oh, children of men. Oh, children of men. Know ye not why we created you all from the same dust, that no one should exalt himself over the other. Ponder how you were created. Since we have created you all from one substance, it is incumbent on you to be even as one soul, to walk with the same feet, eat with the same mouth, and dwell in the same land, that from your inmost being, by your deeds and actions, the signs of oneness and the essence of detachment may be made manifest. Such is my counsel to you, O concourse of light. Heed ye this counsel, that ye may obtain the fruit of honey from the tree of wondrous glory. Know ye not why we created you all from the same dust, that no one should exalt himself over the other? Oh, children of men, oh, children of men, Bahala.
Thank you, dear friend.